So I'm just now getting back into deadlifting a barbell again. So prior to this episode, I had pretty much been on a deadlift cycle for, I want to say, almost 7 straight years. So I was teaching at a level one SFG in Dallas just last weekend, and one of the gentlemen, shout out to Mark, he was like, "Hey, what kind of?" I mentioned barbell deadlifting, and he was kind of wondering, like, wanted to know a little bit about my journey and how I came across barbell deadlifting, and I told him, like, essentially, like, I started barbell deadlifting because I sucked at it. I prior to lifting barbell, like seriously, like intentionally lifting, and I'm doing air quotes right now, um, lifting barbells. I didn't really know what I was doing. I knew what I saw in magazines and whatnot, but I didn't have any intention behind it. I was just kind of going through the motions, if you will. And anywho, I this was before 2013. Prior to this, I just been lifting kettlebells, right? Taking my strength seriously. I was, jujitsu is always my number one priority. And I remember signing up for a barbell certification. This was Strong first barbell certification in Tucson back in 2013. It's called the SFL, Strong First Lifter. And so I was like, I don't even know. And one of the strength tests was I had to do a double body weight deadlift. And at that time, I was weighing about like 194 pounds. Right here in this video, I'm about 205. 95 pounds, 95 pounds. And so I had to deadlift 184 kilos, which is 405. So like, I don't even know where I'm at. I've never really deadlifted a barbell, with any intention anyway. There you see me stepping over the bar. Which I'll talk about. You do not step over the barbell, by the way. Never step over the barbell. I'll get more into why that is. I went to a colleague of mine. He had a gym here in town, and he had barbells. And so I was like, "Hey man, mind if I come over? And I want to see where I'm at, deadlift." He's like, "Yeah, sure, come on over." I go through the progressions and I work my way up to what is pretty much near maximum at 350 pounds. That was it. And I was kind of disappointed, like, wow, I'm not even close. I've got to add 55 pounds on my barbell deadlift in the next 4 weeks. Like the SFL was like 4 or 5 weeks away. So I'll get more into that story another day. But basically, I sucked at the deadlift, and I set myself out on a mission to get better at that, right? And so I was pulling conventional, and eventually, long story short, I got to the 405. I ended up pulling 405 at the SFL. It was kind of a crappy lift, but I got it done and passed, etc. And then after that, I was like, you know what? I'm gonna focus on getting better at this thing. Couldn't break 405 for the longest time. I was stuck at 405 for a whole year. Just couldn't break past it. One of my mentors, Jason Marshall, he's a master strong first instructor, even tried to help me with it with no success. And so eventually I switched to sumo, and I'll talk more about sumo versus conventional, why I did that another time. But essentially what I did was I set out on a mission to get better at deadlifting. And I was essentially on a training cycle for almost 7 years. So from 2013 all the way to 2018, that's a 5-year period. I went from barely being able to deadlift 405 to pulling 290 kilos, 639, raw, no straps, at a body weight of like 205-ish, between 205 and 210, I think it was. It was my 3 times body weight deadlift. And I did that not by doing anything fancy. I didn't do that by using assistance exercises, not training like a power lifter. I did that just by getting good at the deadlift. And the moment that I focused on getting good at the deadlift, everything changed. I went from 405, 184 kilos to 200 kilos, 440. And then my next progression after that was 220 kilos. And then after that, 220 kilos, I went straight from 220 kilos to 230 kilos, I believe it was, which is 529. Then 529 to 240 kilos is 529. And then eventually I pulled 250, which is 551. And then I was stuck at 551 for a while. Went back to dialing in my skills, dialing in my technique. And Eventually I pulled 260 at the TSC, Tactical Strength Challenge, so an official lift, which is 260 is 575. And then eventually the next TSC I pulled 600, let's see here, 282 kilos, which is like 621. And then the following cycle, next TSC, I pulled I believe I pulled 290. No, I didn't pull that at the TSC. I pulled that in my own training, which I have video of. I'll link it in the description. Pulled 290 kilos, 639 at a body weight of around 208, 210, somewhere around there. It was a 3 times body weight deadlift. Anywho, I tell you all that because I'm now back on the grind. So when the pandemic kicked off in 2020 and the world exploded, I decided to take a break. I decided that that was a message from God, that it was time for me to kind of take a break and just focus on some other priorities. And so I basically took off the barbell. I had an abdominal surgery after I pulled 639. My goal was to get to 700. And really my goal was just to see how far I could take this thing, how far I could continue to progress the deadlift without training like a powerlifter. Again, my whole philosophy in life is less is more. Less is more approach to life. And I actually just wrapped up a Q&A, which I'll link here in the description as well, our first Q&A on the channel around effective minimalist training. So my whole goal here is to see how far I can take the deadlift without having to train like a powerlifter. At any point, I have to start adding accessory exercises and whatnot. I'm done trying to progress the deadlift. I've reached my genetic potential. And so I became addicted to the deadlift. I can say I got really good at it. I mean, to be able to pull 639, you've got to be pretty skilled. You have to know what you're doing programming wise. And so that was my main focus. Deadlift was my primary training. I wasn't really doing anything else. Maybe I'd do some presses or snatches from time to time, but it was barbell deadlift and jiu-jitsu. That was it. That's all I did for over 5 years. Once I came back from abdominal surgery, I got back on the grind. I was right before surgery on Halloween 2018, right before that abdominal surgery. I was on week 9 of 12 to try to see if I could close out at 300 kilos for the year, which would be 660. So my goal was to get to eventually 700. Obviously that got put on the back burner. Mid 2019, I start working my way back. My goal was by Halloween, 1 year anniversary, to pull 600 again. I definitely think I could have done that, but my ego got in the way. I made too big of a jump. I'll link that video in the description below as well. I peaked. I didn't peak too soon. I know I could have pulled 600, but I went from, I believe it was I should have pulled 575, but my ego got in the way and I just went straight for 605, and I definitely just kind of screwed that up. But I've taken pretty much the whole year of 2020, the majority of 2021 off from the deadlift, and just focused on my single kettlebell skills, focused on just my own personal training, raising my family and whatnot. And so today's video is the kickoff of 30 days of deadlifting. So I'm doing a little experiment, and I encourage you to check it out. Maybe come along with me if that's something that you want to do. So what I'm going to do is see what happens if I deadlift every single day for 30 days. Now, clearly to do this, you can't be max pulling every single day. I'm going to be taking different approaches every single day, working on specific skill movements on certain parts of the day, certain volume on certain parts of the week. But today's this episode is episode number 1 of 30 days of deadlifting. I'm going to see how that turns out. After that, I'm going to kind of keep going, see what happens before I start jumping on a training cycle. So what I'm going to be doing the next 30 days here is I'm not on a training cycle in this. I'm just working on regaining my skills because it's been a while since I've deadlifted. So you can see here I'm using fairly light weights. I want to say I haven't maxed. The last time I did a max was 2018 before the abdominal surgery, so almost 3 years ago, which was 290, which I know I'm nowhere near that. I want to say if I were to get warmed up and go for a max pull, I would be somewhere between 230, 235 kilos, which would be about 507, 515, if I wanted to pull today. And so what I did was I just took roughly 230 kilos as my estimated max. And I just created a few light percentages here. So this is about 70, 65, I want to say 65% of that, which is 150 kilos. And I'm just going through some technical skill work here. I'm working on dialing in the wedge. I'm working on perfecting my setup. That's really, as you watch this video, you'll see that I'm really intentional about how I set up. When I hinge, when I sit back, the way that I grip the bar, the way that I pull myself in, I'm really intentional about each and every movement, trying to perfect the setup. Because to quote master instructor Fabio Zunin, he said eloquently that the setup is the first repetition, and it's your last repetition, right? Putting the bar down safely. So that was like one of my biggest aha moments. One of my biggest takeaways is getting good at the setup, getting really good at the setup. And that was my intention throughout this whole video, okay? The better your setup is, the more repeatable it becomes. You're gonna be amazed at what happens to your deadlift. Again, I went from barely being able to pull 405, 184 kilos, to pulling 690 kilos within a 5-year period. There was even a 1-year period where I added 50 kilos to my deadlift in like a year. Obviously, I was a new lifter, so you'll have some max gains there, in the early stages. But usually that phase is off, right? You see these max gains, and then as you get more to the higher end of your genetic potential, the jumps are smaller. Well, I was still making big jumps even to the end, towards 290 kilos. I was still going from, I went from 250 to 260 to 270 to 282 to 290. Those aren't small jumps. Like we're talking 20 to 40 pound jumps, even as I'm breaking 600. Right, so there's definitely something to be said for the skill practice, and that's what this whole series of videos is going to be about. Is me taking you through my journey of working my way back to 290. My ultimate goal is 320 kilos to be exact, which would put me at around 704, 705. That is my long-term goal right now. And so this is episode 1 of my road to 700, and to see, can I get there raw, no assistance exercises, no straps, no wraps? Can I get there just training and practicing the deadlift? And we're going to kick this off with 30 days of deadlifting. So that's all I got, man. I'm really excited to dive into this. As you can see here, you're probably wondering what I'm doing with WD-40. I clean my weights with WD-40 because here in South Texas, it's really humid, and so it's hard to get. I want to make sure that I don't, no rust. My equipment doesn't rust. And also it's hard to get the chalk off sometimes, and that chalk pulls moisture in, which could cause, again, your equipment to rust. So what I do at the end of every training session, I use a rag with a little WD-40, and it completely takes the chalk off, nice and clean. The chalk doesn't come back. I've been able to maintain this equipment in South Texas temperatures and in a really like salty environment, because we're right on the coast, without a ton of rusting. So that's kind of what I'm doing here. But that's pretty much all I got. So if you're new to deadlifting, right, if you want to join me on this journey of mastering the barbell deadlift, I encourage you to download. I have got a free ebook that should get you on that path to deadlifting. It's called the Deadlift Blueprint. I will link it in the comment section or the description area. Grab a copy of that, start dialing your skill set, and then from there, you'll be on the road to mastering the deadlift. So today's day 1, 30 days of deadlifting, my journey back to 290, and ultimate journey of 700-pound deadlift. Later.